Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. Okay, so welcome to the John Schultz podcast, and I'm excited to be here. I've done multiple episodes now, so hopefully I'm getting used to doing this. But we have an amazing guest today, Brett Yormark. Not only is he going to be a great guest, but he happens to be a really close friend of mine. I've known him for years, love him to death, and we're excited to hear from him. He has a very interesting career and life that we can all learn from. So I'm going to start out giving a little background on you. So you've always dreamed of working in sports, so that's, you know, you're still you're out of it now a little bit, but you always were, you know, on your way to creating more and more things in the sports world, which is great. You sold sponsorships from the Detroit Pistons. You sold TV time to Minnesota-based sports teams, and right out of college, you worked selling tickets for the Nets. Right? Correct?
Yep.
Then you went on, obviously, you know, got your chops going, learned how to be yourself, and then you worked for NASCAR for 6 years as managing director of corporate marketing. And I know, at least I remember, I think the largest naming rights deal in history at that time, which is awesome. Then you were the former CEO of Brooklyn Sports and Entertainment, and you oversaw a move, a rebrand, you know, moving to Brooklyn, a stadium. Obviously, that's a lot to be on your plate at one time. And here you are today, obviously veering out a little bit from sports, and we'll hear more about it, as the COO of Roc Nation and the co-CEO of Roc Nation Unified. Roc Nation was founded by Jay-Z, an entertainment company, and has expanded into brand and multimedia platform, obviously growing and growing and growing. We see him around all the time doing different things. So Brett, welcome and thank you for doing this.
It's honored to be here with you, buddy.
We're excited to hear from you.
And this is the highlight of my week.
There you go. Listen, that's a good thing. It's Friday too, right? You can have a good 100%. Weekend after this. All right. So I like to start from the beginning because I think most people in life look at that person like yourself, right? The success story and, you know, years of being in business and going through what we all go through to get where we want to go, climbing that mountain, whatever cliche we want to say. But I like to hear from the beginning on why it ended up, or, you know, being the way it is and how you got there. So when you were a kid, how did you even see yourself working in sports? Like what was the passion play that got you there?
You know, it's interesting you talk about passion, you know, because my career has really been all about passion. And I'll take a step back, you know, as a kid growing up, always loved sports. I grew up in a single parent family, but fortunate enough, I had a twin brother, Michael, and Michael and I just played sports. You know, that was our outlet. That was our life.
Identical twin. I know that. I've seen both of you together. You know, sometimes, well, now I really know, but it was hard at the beginning.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting. As much as I love sport, I wasn't sure I'd be able to pursue a career because it's, you know, it's challenging. It's not easy to break in. So when I went to college, I went to Indiana University, and my junior year of college, I did an internship. And I did it with a great investment house at the time called Salomon Brothers. And I worked there for 3.5 months. It was a wonderful experience. But following that experience, I realized it wasn't my passion. I thought it was my calling because as a kid growing up, although I loved sports, most of my mom's friends were connected to Wall Street. So I had a lot of exposure to Wall Street. But what internships should teach us is not just, it shouldn't reaffirm necessarily exactly that this is where you want to be in life. It should also tell you maybe that you should pivot and try something different. And although I had a great experience at Salomon Brothers, at that point, I realized I'm going to pivot and truly chase my passion and dreams, which was to be in sports. And at that moment, I realized that was my true calling. That's where I wanted to be, and that's where I wanted to, pursue a career. And thankfully, I've been lucky and blessed along the way to have been able to be in the industry for almost 30 years, and I've loved it. I've never taken it for granted, and thankfully, I've been able to ascend to a pretty high level.
It's interesting because we're constantly trying to figure out what we want. I mean, even to this day, both of us, right? We're always trying to figure out where do we fit? How do we create the purpose that gets us to wake up every morning? But what people should understand is I got there by knowing what I didn't want, right? So trying many, many, many things until I'm like, whoa, this felt good. And it's never what you think it is, right? There's so much out there to try. And I think when you're younger, in the old days, if you moved around in jobs, you looked at like you're unemployable. I don't agree with that. I think, you're almost better off not doing something that you can't put your brain and yourself into 100%. So I love how that's sort of how it happened for you, right?
It was very clear. It was very clear to me at that point in time, having spent that summer on Wall Street, and as great as the experience was, it reaffirmed for me where I needed to be ultimately, and that was sports. And I haven't looked back ever since.
That's great. All right, so you obviously went out of college and you did this pivot, and now you're like, okay, I'm in sports, and you started out in the business development sales side. Now, we know that as a CEO, as you grow in your career, a lot of that sort of goes away and other people are doing that. But what do you think you gain by starting in that direction? Because that's the same way I started. And I feel it's a talent that obviously you have within you, but I think is a very important talent. And tell me about sort of what you went through and how you navigated it.
So I was fortunate to start at the bottom. Some people say, well, you were fortunate to start at the bottom. Yeah, I was, because I had visibility to every area of the franchise. And sports, when I broke with the New Jersey Nets back in 1988, it's not like it is today where teams are a little bit more sophisticated, a lot more sophisticated, in fact, and are much bigger. We only had 25 people in the front office. So when I ultimately got that job, I was given a pad, a pencil, and a cube, and they said, go to work. And it was trial and error, really. Didn't have much management, but ultimately, no different than today, it was all about driving revenue and creating value for the company. So starting off at the Nets, I was selling sponsorship, selling tickets. I worked in game operations on game nights. I mean, I really had exposure to every facet of the business, which was fantastic for me. And I gravitated to the commercial side. I knew that, okay, now that I'm in the environment I want to be in, I want to make my name by being a guy that is in the commercial side of the business.
And for everyone to understand that when you say commercial side, what does that mean?
Selling tickets, selling sponsorship, and driving revenue.
Okay.
That was where I wanted to kind of hang my hat and develop my skill sets.
Now, was that because it was a natural?
I think it was natural. Yes.
Because like you're a CEO now, right? Like most CEOs, that's unless you're a startup or an entrepreneur, but even them, like you can invent a lot of things and not have the execution. So how important did you feel that skill set meant while you were doing it and then through your career?
Well, ultimately, our business is a revenue-driven business. Now, that doesn't mean that the only track you can take is the commercial track to becoming a CEO. Some people come through the finance area, maybe the legal area. But I always felt that my best chance in getting to where I wanted to be was to go up the revenue track. And at a very early age, I realized that. And I created for myself what I call now my own personal progression ladder. Okay. And I realized to get to the CEO, which was at the top of the ladder, there was quite a few steps I'd have to take to get there, most of which were from a revenue perspective. And that's the track I took. And every move I made in my career, starting with the Nets and then thereafter, was always building on the revenue side. So when I was at the Nets, it was a local sale. Then when I went to Chicago and worked for Cat Sports, it became a regional sale. Then when I went to Detroit, it was more of a comprehensive sales and an integrated sales environment where I wasn't selling one particular item, I was selling a menu of items. And then when I came back to the New Jersey Nets, I honed my skills that I had acquired in my first 5 or 6 years and started learning management. So I became the senior vice president of sales. So I managed a team in a major market like New York. And then I ultimately realized as I was going up that progression ladder, I was going to stay in sales, but I needed a national Rolodex. I needed a network nationally beyond just what I've been able to acquire regionally and locally. And I went to NASCAR. And there's no bigger commercial sport in the US.
So when you went to NASCAR, it wasn't that you weren't in, like, so that was your next level.
That was my next progression because I realized, okay, I've learned the local sales. I've learned regional. I've learned the integrated sales approach. When I worked in Detroit, they owned their own building and I was selling everything from tickets to sponsorship to lifestyle programs. Then I came back to New York because I wanted not only just to be known as a seller, but I also wanted to learn management. So they brought me back as senior vice president of sales for the Nets. Still a player coach, still involved in the revenue side of the business, but also managing a team. Then I said to myself, I got to go national. Got a great Rolodex. You're only good as your relationships, but I had to go national. And I was fortunate enough to get a job with NASCAR, running corporate sales and marketing nationally for the sanctioning body. And at that moment, I had some big national wins, which you identified earlier. We rebranded NASCAR, which was the Winston Cup, to the Nextel Cup. It was a major to-do. And I used that platform ultimately to become a CEO of the Nets and ultimately the Brooklyn Nets. But my progression ladder was very well thought out. I knew from the beginning I was going to take the revenue track. And by doing that, I realized there were certain parts of the commercial business that I needed to learn in order to get me ultimately to the top of the ladder. And
all right, so you used your character. I'm big on character traits. I think if you live in them, you're going to get through not loving everything that you do every day, right? Because we all have our ups and downs, but it's like what we're born to do, right? Like your top traits are, and what I love about you is that you always stick to your knitting. Like you don't try to be what you aren't. But as you progressed and then you became the CEO of the Nets, right? All this led up to that. You're in Jersey. It has to move. You have all these other things that are not really, in your lane as far as what you're used to. So let's talk about challenges now, because I think people want to hear how people get through things and some of the tricks and tribulations of it. So what do you think was your biggest challenges now where you couldn't just focus on revenue? I know you're a relationship guy, and yes, that's part of it, but now you had to get yourself your hands dirty in a different way. Like, what was your biggest challenge?
So my biggest challenge was, and I kind of knew this going in, but maybe wasn't crystal clear. When I took the job as the CEO of the Nets, it was with the caveat that the team was moving to Brooklyn. I didn't know much about real estate, eminent domain, and the challenges in moving the team to Brooklyn. I just knew that that was the ultimate goal. So let's say I was a little naive. What was said to me was that we'll get to Brooklyn in 3 years, Brett. You'll be in New Jersey for a couple of years. It ended up being 7. So the challenge was, how do you maintain a bit of a viable business in New Jersey and stay connected to a Jersey fan base when you know you're moving to Brooklyn, okay? And you've got to start setting the tone and flavor for that move to Brooklyn. And it was a challenging dynamic.
Well, listen, I mean, it's like I like you were moving what we loved somewhere else. And how do you keep people engaged?
And in some respects, we became a lame duck team because fans aren't going to stay vested when they know you're moving across the river. So that was one of the biggest challenges, maintaining a viable business in New Jersey while trying to, at the same time, simultaneously building your roadmap to Brooklyn. And then in 2008, in the midst of, balancing that challenge, you hit a financial crisis. Okay, where, are you going to get the financing to move to Brooklyn? Are sponsors going to commit? So you're a viable business getting to Brooklyn, et cetera, et cetera. So there was multiple challenges along the way to Brooklyn. And then there was the eminent domain issue, which truly caused the delays in getting to Brooklyn, because we were moving the team to an area in Brooklyn where there was housing already there.
Yeah.
And we had to displace, those homeowners in order to build Barclays Center. So there was multiple challenges that we were facing. And then when I look back on them now, I just think in life, you need to have great conviction. You got to have great belief in what you're doing. And not that you want to convince yourself it's going to happen, but you got to make sure that on the merits of the story, on the merits of, this vision and mission, that you can get there. And I never wavered on why we were moving to Brooklyn and why it was a great story and it had to be told. Yes, there was moments where I said to myself, I'm not sure I can do it. There was multiple setbacks.
So here you are. Listen, CEOs, in some respects, it's a lonely place to be. So what enabled you to, listen, I know you're one of the most convicted belief people I know, which I love that about you. I love the energy. But listen, dude, everyone has issues where they leave the building and they're like, so what did you draw upon? Who'd you draw your strength from? How'd you get through that? Because this was years of just one thing going wrong after the other.
And it is lonely, when you're in that situation. Thankfully, I had a pretty good network. Bruce Ratner, who was the owner and the developer in Brooklyn and truly had the vision for moving the team to Brooklyn, was always convinced it was going to happen. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. And I relied on his passion and his conviction and the fact that he was a developer and had gone through some of these challenges before on other meaningful projects here in the city, that ultimately we would get there. So in some respects, I relied on him and his knowledge and his conviction, with respect to, seeing that light and seeing that end game. I also surrounded myself with people like me that had the energy and conviction for the move and wanting to see it through. And, when I established a team in New Jersey, that core team stayed with me for, in most cases, 15 years. Because they shared the same dream and mission and vision that I had, and certainly Bruce, in getting this team to Brooklyn. So I surrounded myself with people that were like-minded. And as I was putting that team together, I told them candidly, there was going to be challenges. There's going to be setbacks. We're going to have delays. You got to be resilient, and you got to have enough, fortitude to see this thing through. And thankfully, as a collective group, we were able to do that. But there was no way I could have done it on my own without the positive reinforcement by the people around me, and certainly Bruce Ratner, because this was his dream. This was his mission in life. And he kind of carried us to Brooklyn in many respects. And then ultimately, as we were getting a little bit closer and certainty was being created, we got the commercial community, the Barclays of the world and others, to vote yes. And they became believers. Despite the challenges, they became the believers. So what happened ultimately is that we started galvanizing the community around this mission and vision. And even though there wasn't great certainty, there was enough to get people to buy in. And then ultimately we made it happen, which was fantastic. But again, in moments where there's challenges, I'm certainly not one to think I could do it on my own. You got to surround yourself with the right people, the right character, and the people that are going to positively reinforce that what you're doing is right, and you got to stick to it and stick to the game plan. And that's what we did.
It's interesting too. I almost feel that prepared you for everything to come, right? Which is, and we're going to hear a little bit more about what you're doing now, but even more, having those obstacles, those pain points, those things that you got to bust through the walls. Like what Henry Ford said, if you believe it'll happen, it will. If you don't, it won't. I mean, it's just that simple, right? And look at the legacy he created. You and the people that went with you, I see them now as all these successes everywhere else. And as much as like everyone felt all that uncertainty during, it was 7 years, and they all stayed with you because they believed in you. And it's almost like, you're in it and you want it to happen and you just keep going. And it's like why, it's like the journey. It's like why we say the journey is really what makes us feel the impact in our lives. And, as I know you, I know a lot of the people that work for you, and all these successes have been born all over the sports world, from startups to teams, and you should be proud of that. But I guess for the audience to understand, like, it's so easy to throw in the towel. I mean, it's so easy to take something that's, a flowing, easy thing to produce with a big company. And I think you get most of your growth moments with going into the uncertainty part of business and learning that that's okay too, right? Allowing yourself to feel it.
But, I'll tell you something, John, it's an interesting dynamic because I had a conversation yesterday with a very well-known private equity professional. And we were talking about the notion of quitting. And I think you learn that early in life. And I was telling him about an experience my son had. My son, Drake is a very good athlete. He didn't have the senior year, on the basketball team that he probably would have liked. There were some challenges that came with it. And it would have been very easy for him to quit. But you know what? He was relentless in going to practice, proving himself time and time again. And I think even at that level, you build incredible character that stays with you. And it prepares you, for the real world that we all face. Life isn't easy. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have obstacles. I know when I'm interviewing people, I often ask them, tell me the biggest challenge and tell me how you got through it. And when you reference some of my colleagues that have now gone on to run the Detroit Pistons or running Hard Rock and other great sports entertainment companies, I know they were asked the same question, because as leaders, we know we're going to face uncertainty, and it's how you fight through it and manage through it that really matters. And there's not a lot of people that are willing to do it. So, but it starts early in life, that character, and not quitting and fighting through it.
Well, I think it also starts by being around that, right?
True.
Like they always say, like, you are the 5 people you hang around with. Like, I always want to be around people way smarter than me that I can learn from and just take the little tidbits myself and apply it to what I'm doing. And that's what I seek. And you don't even have to do it at work. You do it outside work by joining clubs and things that you're interested in. And I think the more people you surround yourself with, which you've done your whole life, and which the people that have worked with you have felt, it's like all rising tides, right? They just rise up, which is terrific.
Yep.
So, all right. So you finally got to Brooklyn, right? Successful. You had all the, it's gorgeous. I remember going there the first time. I was like, whoa. I mean, just the way it was designed, the energy, at that time, all the new technology. I mean, if you think about it now, it's almost crazy how far this has gone. And then, you had some things that you wanted to do to make it a bigger thing, which was, the hockey team, right? The Islanders. And obviously that didn't go as well as you thought. So how did you get through a challenge like that? Knowing that you want to try, but obviously it didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out.
Listen, the Islanders, when I look back on my years in Brooklyn, that was probably our biggest challenge. And I just think we didn't know some of the dynamics going in. We thought bringing another sports franchise to Brooklyn would be ideal. It would fill dates in the book at the Barclays Center. The Islanders at the time, Belmont, which is their home now, really wasn't even on the radar screen. They needed to move out of the Coliseum. They needed to move to a state-of-the-art building, or who knows where they would have gone. Maybe they would have left New York. And part of it was helping the Islanders and their future, but at the same time, it was also a business decision that we made that we thought was going to really be very additive to Barclays Center. It ended up being very challenging because the team never became rooted in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's a very unique community. They know someone that is all in and someone that's not. And, the dynamic was the players were living in Long Island, practicing there and just coming to the borough for games. And it was a little bit of a disconnect. No one's fault. And then, the building wasn't ideal for hockey, the way it was built. And everyone knew that going in. I don't know if we paid enough attention to that, to the overall experience of having hockey at the Barclays Center, knowing that it wasn't an ideal fit and wasn't built for hockey. So there was a lot of moving parts that maybe had we spent more time considering and evaluating, who knows if we would have made the same decision. But I'm happy that it ended in a good place for the Islanders, where they ultimately moved back to Long Island. They played their games at the Coliseum while their UBS Center was being built. Now they have a state-of-the-art home, not only for the team, but for the fans. And it's worked out really well for them. And listen, in life, you make mistakes and you learn from them. And in our zest to have two major franchises in Brooklyn, maybe we overlooked certain things that we shouldn't have. And I think that was a lesson for me as a CEO. Although a group of us made that decision, it was certainly on my shoulders. And, I spend more time doing due diligence now and looking at the data, because maybe we didn't do as much as we should have.
But you're also an unbelievable brand builder, right? So did you learn that a brand's stronger than you thought, right? You can't just move one and expect what you have existing to actually carry through. And I'm learning it even like with, in the social media days, even this podcast, it's like, you're creating a brand and it's a true essence of what you are and what you stand for.
Well, what we did, and because of the success we had with the transformational brand reset of the Nets, we felt we could apply a similar strategy to the Islanders. But the Nets move was very different. We moved the Nets to Brooklyn. We took on the Brooklyn name. We endeared ourselves to the Brooklyn community.
You became it, yes.
We became Brooklyn. We were inspired by Brooklyn. And unfortunately, we didn't have the latitude to do the same thing with the Islanders because we didn't own the team.
Yep.
Okay. They were just effectively a tenant in the building. So effectively, what worked for the Nets and that model and that blueprint, we were not ultimately able to apply that to the Islanders. And I think that was the biggest issue, because we all see when you go all in and you galvanize, a particular team like we did with the Nets, in a community like Brooklyn, good things can really happen. And we unfortunately didn't have that same leeway. And it's okay. We made a mistake. It ultimately ended fine for the Islanders. It was a little bit of a hiccup. And we moved on. But when I do look back on Brooklyn, and we did a lot of awfully good things for the community, for obviously the brands we built, that was not, one of the highlights. But it's okay because it ended fine for the Islanders and their fans.
Listen, like you said, you learned that, you said it at the beginning, all in conviction matters. Like, even in your job, I always say, like, you don't need to be Einstein and create, relativity. Innovate in your job. Innovate in what you do every day. Make your area the best you could possibly make it. and keep the conviction, and then people are going to have conviction around you, right? But the same thing, you'll learn from this. But I think that's a great thing. It all worked out, and it showed you again, like we said at the beginning, what you now you know what you don't want to do next, or what you won't do next, right? In the next thing. So yeah, so all in all, obviously, what a success story. I mean, grueling getting there, and you should be commended. Grueling.
It ultimately exceeded everything we ever thought. The building, the team went global. We made a difference in all the right ways. I always looked at the team. I was like I was a steward of the team, but the team was really for the community. And Brooklyn has embraced it. The building is at the epicenter of Brooklyn, and that platform allowed us to build beyond just Brooklyn. When we got to renovate the Nassau Coliseum, and we took a hold of Webster Hall, and we ended up getting a G League team, and we just built out our portfolio. But the catalyst for that growth was obviously the success we had with the Nets and Barclays Center. And then in the fall of 2019, or a little bit earlier, when ownership at the time, Mikhail Prokhorov, Dmitry Razumov, decided they wanted to sell. Effectively, we passed the baton to Joe Tsai. And that was following, free agency, when we were able to get Kyrie and Durant. So we left them with something very, very, very special that they're able to now build on. And I'm still a fan. We think we left behind a legacy in Brooklyn, and because we were able to take Brooklyn to the world. And then I transitioned over to Roc Nation about 2 weeks later. We closed on September 19th, and I started here October 3rd. A lot of people said to me, Brett, take some time, relax, enjoy life. But that's not my way. So I jumped right in here. Jay-Z was always a friend, and there was always that thought and plan that I would shift over to Roc Nation. And so I
got a question because that shift was too easy. All right. This is not sports, right? This is not.
Well, it's interesting because I tell people, John, that we are in the sports and entertainment business. We have a large athlete representation business, both domestically and now in Europe. We're in rugby and European football in Europe, and then in domestically baseball, football, basketball. So we play in the sports arena pretty heavily. And I often describe to people when they ask me, Brett, what's the difference of the two jobs? I say, I'm still in sports. I'm still in music, which was predominantly what I was doing in Brooklyn. I'm just in different areas of the sandbox. So rather than managing buildings, I'm managing talent on the artist side.
Right.
Rather than managing teams, I'm working with athletes. So I'm still doing what I did in Brooklyn, but just doing it a little differently now.
All right, so what's your biggest challenge? Because listen, there's nothing like driving into that stadium through the loading dock, right?
Oh yeah, listen.
And then like it's like the castle. Like I mean.
No, listen. And I still go back. We have season tickets, the company does. We're also in the event business. We own Made in America, which is a huge music festival in Philadelphia, 10 years running, fabulous platform for us. But I would, the challenge.
Yeah, you're meant what was your,
I would say the biggest challenge for me is understanding talent. And because that's a different dynamic than, people are different than buildings. Okay.
No doubt.
And, and what goes into managing talent and interfacing with talent. I enjoy it both on the sports side and on the music side, but it's very different. There's no voice to a building, if you will. It doesn't speak back, when you're working with talent, it's quite a bit different, but I enjoy it because we as a company have been able to work with some of the biggest names in the industry, fabulous people, both stateside and in Europe. And from that perspective, it's been fantastic. I mean, names, Alicia Keys and Meek Mill and Christina Aguilera and Rihanna are all members of the Roc Nation family. In sports, I mean, we've got some of the biggest names in European football, Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku. We've got LaMelo Ball, who probably is our biggest name in basketball and was an all-star this year. And I mean, it's fantastic. and I'm interfacing with great people every day. So I'm enjoying it. But listen, like any business, there's challenges. I mean, think about COVID. You know, I'm in the live business. Wasn't live business for a year and a half. You know,
That had to be
presented
tough.
a lot of challenges.
Yeah, a lot of
Absolutely.
challenges.
And we had to find ways to create value, you know, for our best clients. And we did.
But Brett, like you're like what, and this is what I want to tie back to, because what you went through with the Nets and the moving and the never knowing and the uncertainty, how did that help you with COVID? Like,
Oh, I mean, listen, it I think helped me tremendously. We, unlike any other company, at least in our industry, we came back in July of 20. So we've been in here full time, 5 days a week, and our ownership group decided they wanted to create a sense of normalcy in a world that was no longer normal. And we had a great testing program, great protocols, and our office very quickly became our safe haven. And employees gravitated to it. And so we haven't missed a beat. I think in many respects, it helped us salvage 20. It gave us, you know, a chance to do some very good things in 21, and it helped us set the table for what I think will be a very successful 22. So we were very resilient. And as a company, you know, our DNA is about breaking boundaries and doing the unexpected, and failure's not an option. And we applied a lot of those basic principles to how we address COVID. And I'm thrilled that we did it. I'm thrilled that ownership took the position they did. And I think we're in a much better place today than we would have been. I mean, let's face it, you know, consumer behavior right now is very different. Companies that are looking to get employees back in have to recondition employees to do it the way they used to do it. And I'm not sure that's going to be that easy. In fact, I know it won't be. We're not having to deal with that challenge. So we can put all our emphasis and all of our energies and resources against growing the business versus worrying about whether employees are going to show up every day. So,
and it's definitely going to change. I just hope everyone, after we get through this, because it was a trauma. I mean, and when you have a freedom that you've never really had as working for different companies, no matter what position you are, senior or not, you know, that commute, that whole grind that as a society we've been living through, I get it. But I just hope people realize, which, you know, you've said and you sort of, you know, are a poster child for, is the relationship and the mentoring. And like my best ideas have been with people just walking like into a meeting or out of a meeting, or
and
someone
John,
says, why don't we go get a quick cup of coffee?
I know you love young people.
Right.
And people love being around you. And I can tell you that even just for the young people that work here, the fact that they were able to still interface responsibly with management and had access to management daily was fantastic for their personal growth versus necessarily having to do it via Zoom or by other means. And you're right. I think you know, life is going to go through a permanent pivot, and it's never going to be the way it was. And I'm sure there'll be some kind of hybrid that's going to work for everyone. But there's nothing that replaces that, you know, that relationship building, that one-on-one in person. I mean, I didn't travel much. I was in the office, you know, for a good part of 2 years. Only in January did I start traveling again, which you know, I've enjoyed doing, getting back into see people. And
well, you forget, right? You forget how good it. I mean,
no, listen, you forget
it's a
how
grind
good you feel.
too, but you forget
Absolutely.
how good it was.
Absolutely. Now, I will tell you, I was very efficient via Zoom. I think there's efficiencies, but boy, do I enjoy still going out and having a meal and going to an office and interfacing with someone, because I don't think we can ever replace that.
Right. I agree. So the last question, obviously, we don't want to take too much of your time. You're working with your brother, family, right? You really haven't done that. I mean, because you're identical twins. So I know the bond of an identical twin. I have friends that are. So how's that? How is that working out?
It's been great.
Good.
Michael, we both effectively have our own areas of accountability, which I think works really well. Michael's in Europe, building our brand and business in that part of the world. I'm the COO here. Well, I'm the COO globally for the company, but obviously here in New York City and working out of the city every day. Also, we share responsibility with being the co-CEO of Roc Nation Unified, which is the commercial arm of Roc Nation. So we interface quite a bit there. But so far, it's been fantastic. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I haven't had a chance to visit Michael in Europe. And we opened up a new office there right before COVID, but I plan on going next month and getting to know his team there, which he has put together an incredible team. So it's really been working out really well for us. And I think we complement each other because our strengths are in different places.
Well, hopefully now that you can travel, you will switch places with him for a week and see if anyone notices, because that would be a good coming back out to the world prank to Paul. But
I agree.
So Brett, thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate this.
No, this was great. And listen, you've been terrific, a great friend, a great mentor. I love what you're doing here with the podcast. And I know you're doing incredible things professionally with the company. So I'm always here as a resource for you. And I'm just honored that you asked me to join you for a couple minutes today.
Oh, I think everyone's going to love it. All right, everyone. Thank you. We thank Brett Yormark. This is a great episode. Hopefully everyone will enjoy it. I know they will. And Brett, I will see you soon. So thank you.
All right, my friend. Be well.